Hello, I'm Michael Northrup, and again I'm working with you on Pastel Portraiture, Wild Color Edition. This is our exciting opportunity to look at how our portraits can be developed using non-flesh tones, regardless of what kind of flesh we're looking at, Caucasian, African flesh, South Asian, East Asian. All of these tones of flesh are unique in their own way, but as I said in the first video, they can all be created with variants of these 6 or 7 pastels, none of which are flesh tone. I grew up, of course, in an age when Crayola called something flesh, which was in a racially insensitive way called flesh. It looked a lot like the flesh that I had as a child, but not even the flesh that I have as an adult. And so the idea that we can have a certain formula for flesh that looks like flesh, I find really troublesome. It's lazy. We don't want to think about how we create those flesh tones. And it just doesn't excite the eye. What we're trying to do is involve as much of the brain as possible when the viewer is engaged in our image. We think of a portrait as something simple in that we are used to a camera capturing exactly the moment that a sitter is in front of this little phone or box, or depending on how old you are. I still remember a camera taking pictures rather than phones. But if you are thinking that way, you're forgetting that as an artist, we can capture more than the moment. Now today I'm working from a photograph of my mother-in-law, and I told you in the last lesson and in the first one, I needed you to get a good reference. Now I hope that what you've done before you proceed with this lesson is to get a very good reference photograph, or make sure that the person you're painting is going to be right next to you so you have constant reference as you go. And then I want you to set up, make sure your drawing is done. I told you last time how to choose your background color and how to put your background in. So I'm hoping that you will make sure that that is all done. And I said, anchor the image with black. So this is just making sure that you have the darkest points established. And as I said, it kind of creates a barrier for the wild color, because now we start with the wild stuff. This process always starts with the violet, and we're going to have this deep blue violet. Please don't use a real red violet. That's going to not accomplish what we need to do. We're thinking about building up flesh as it appears. If you look at your arm, for example, and see the blood that's returning to the heart, you'll see that it's blue. We have a lot of that blue violet in our flesh. And so that is what we're really looking to pull out here. We're building up layer upon layer of the true flesh. If I'm cut open, I don't look peach color, even though you may see peach color on the screen. When we're looking here at the image, we want to think about that blueness going through the veins, returning to the heart. We have the red meat. Then we have this stuff on top, which is basically, for Caucasians, a transparent, it's just white. If you cut off a hunk of flesh, for a Caucasian person, it's white. We are deprived of any pigment in our skin, and so it's just like a translucent layer over that meat. The more color and more pigment a person has, the less influence of the deep tissue is on the surface anatomy in terms of color. We all have equal amounts in terms of the definition, or lack of definition when you get to my age and weight, but it's the color I'm talking about. And please understand, this whole lecture is about color. So we start with this deep violet. that's going to match a little bit these colors going through my veins. It's going to be a little redder, and that's on purpose, which I'll explain in a little bit. I'm going to look at all the darkest areas. So I'm looking around the eyes. I'm looking over here on this side of the face. There's a lot of dark here. There's a dark on the other side of the philtrum, this mark here. There's the dark in this. This is called the nasolabial fold. Under the chin, beside the shoulder. All of these are really dark marks. And so I'm going to put this on. Now don't put it on with, such aggression that you can't work over it, where you need to leave tooth in the paper. But please understand that I do not want you to be wimpy. I told you in the first video, I always encourage my students to go to the dark side. And what I mean by that is start dark, start bold. Otherwise, we end up with this image that is not attractive at all. Now, I will tell you, when you start this, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. Got to live with that. If your image has to be pretty from the moment you start to the end, you're never going to be successful. You're going to be too tentative. You're going to make the image too precious. We need to get in there and make it bold. Now, obviously, if you have a person sitting for you and they're getting up on their breaks and looking at your image, that can be intimidating. So if you're working with a live image, I'd suggest covering it up every time they walk away. It'll help you stay focused. So I'm going to go around everywhere that I see dark. And I'm just warning you, this is going to get ugly fast. And that is something that I can't avoid. Now, because this is not a strong light and dark image, I don't have a tremendous amount of light and shadow here just because of the nature of the image. There's not going to be a lot of dark violet. But what you're going to see me do is spreading the violet kind of liberally around. I'm going to use the violet even on the glasses. What you want to do is to create a pathway for the eye. And the eye loves similar colors. We like to group like things. We learned that in kindergarten, right? You've got 3 ducks and a chicken, and they tell you, okay, group the ducks. We like to put these things together. It's a part of our natural process of learning. And so your brain's going to want to see all the purples in the image. So I'm going to put purple over here in the shirt. I have no problem putting violet in the hair. I usually tell my students not to use the word purple, so if any see this, they're going to yell at me that I'm saying purple. But understand that if I can move this all the way through, it's not even a problem to hint at this, go back and hint at each of the colors in the background, because the eye picks this up. Our eye is way more subtle than we think it is, so we need to put these in as a little trail, leaving clues for the eye to move around the portrait image. So again, in the lips, especially the upper lip, which is in the shadow, and some in the lower lip. You go back into this spot. By the way, as I'm doing this, there's an old Eastern European Jewish legend I learned about when I was learning Hebrew at synagogue years ago, that says that this little mark here, they tell you where it comes from. Before you're born, there's an angel that guides you through your life, teaching you everything that you need to know. And of course, if you were born with all the knowledge of everything that was going to happen in your life, it would be just too traumatic to even face. So what happens is that right before you're born, your guardian angel comes and extinguishes that flame, that glowing light, so that you are born fresh, but somewhere in the back of your memory you have everything you need. And it's that fingerprint of the angel who extinguishes that flame that's left right here above your mouth. Isn't that a beautiful story? So that's one way of explaining this little anatomical feature here. I do the violet over the black because if I don't, I end up with this muddy look, and I'm really not fond of mud on an image, on a portrait. So stay with me here. Understand that this, is going to take just a moment here for this color. In fact, I'm probably not going to make you sit through everything that I do with each color. I'll start focusing on an area, come back, finish, and then on the next video show you how we pull it together in the whole thing and then move to details. So again, I want to move in here. And because I'm doing that and going to show you more later, I'm not going to build everything up, but I'm going to do most of it here. So you should begin clearly to see the image beginning to form. Now, it looks scary, right? Because we've got these eyes defined and all this purple now. Now, it seems to look nothing like this. You have to let it go. Some of these areas I can see I need to reinforce. I have to come back. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the violet in the end. But you only want to put that dark violet wherever it's going to be darkest in the final image. Notice that I'm almost scribbling. This is part of the process. Please don't allow yourself to get too caught up in the details at this point. I am really thinking about where the shadow of the glasses goes, coming this way. My light source is coming this way. Always pay attention to your light source before you begin. A little bit in here. Perhaps a lot there. So, looks scary. It's going to get scarier. The next one we have is this bottle green. If you can think of it as a forest green, maybe. It is it's not that dark blue green that I used in the last video for the background. This is, if you can see here, that's not an untrue value here. It's a deep green, what a lot of people would call forest. Now we're going to do this over all the violet. This is going to help us to begin to play with our colors. If you don't have a color wheel, I suggest you print one off from the internet or you make one yourself, even better. We're artists, so you want to maybe take your pastels and do this, lay it out with your primaries, yellow at the top, red to the left and blue to the right, and then begin to go with your secondaries and so forth, and then you can start the color wheel. Make sure you have one handy if you're not really familiar with it, because we're always trying to think about what each color is doing to the color that we're working above. And so with violet, violet is the opposite of yellow. And so what we're actually doing now by putting the green over the violet, the yellow in the green is neutralizing a little bit of the violet here. It's graying it out. The green is going to set up as the complement to the red we're putting on top of that and gray it out. What we're trying to do is get a neutral grayish color that's moving in the flesh to make the rosy colors of the light part of the face more vibrant and more alive. It makes it look like blood's running through the flesh. So we are taking the green now. I don't need to do it in the hair. Green hair looks kind of bad. But I think in the video, yes, you can already see how it's turning the violet gray. So why didn't we just put gray? Well, it's a little bit of a lesson in physiology. When I use just black and white, only the rods of the eye are affected. I don't have time in this video to teach a whole lecture on the physiology of sight. So what I'm suggesting is that you look it up if you're not familiar with rods and cones. But when we add color to make gray, we actually have more excitement for the brain because the rods and the cones are all firing. And when we're using complementary colors, now the cones are working on overdrive because we have these kind of opposite colors that show with the cones. So by using this kind of color scheme, even if I end up with something that looks very natural, which is my hope, and it will, we're going to have to make the brain shift into drive here, not be passive in looking. So that's why we're doing this. Now the places I want to be very red in the end, like cheeks, the end of the nose, and especially the lips. I'm not going to put a lot of green because green's going to neutralize the red. You find that out naturally. But I will put the green farther than I put the violet. So now I'm taking the green over some of the red areas, especially on the shadow side of the face. Because on the shadow side, we want that side to set back. It's just a basic rule when we're dealing with color. Warm colors like red and yellow and orange all move forward. Cool colors like blue, green, violet, those all are moving back. They recede. And so we can play with this to exaggerate the face. We want the shadows to be to recede into space, and we want those cheeks, the nose, the lips, the chin, all to come forward into space. So we're going to play with this, making sure that we keep a lot of cool in the shadows. Most people, when I get done with these and we start to review, they don't even see anymore the greens and violets unless I point it out. I will tell you in advance, there is a little bit of reflected light that's blue here, which I'm going to keep. So in the end, I'm going to add another pastel. I'll just warn you now, as that's in another video. When we're doing finishing touches, I'm going to put a nice blue reflected light coming from a window on the side of her face. It'll help make sense of the lights that are coming here, as well as the light that's direct here on the glasses and on this side of the face. Let's see. So again, I can put more green where I'm going to just want the red to gray out just a little bit. Don't be afraid to use the side of your pastel, but as I said in the first time,